Hey everybody, this is Jack Hollow with another money episode, and today I want to introduce to you Financial Samurai, or his human name or regular person name, Sam Dogan. Sam is a guy I've been listening to a little bit more on his podcast, and some of the recent episodes really caught my attention. I started looking into him more, and one of the ideas that he recently brought up, he thought, I should put my idea or formula in the ring for a Nobel Prize. And it sounded like an outlandish idea at first, but then I was like, well, a lot of Nobel Prizes for these formulas are very theoretical and don't really work in practice. So I started listening to him, and it got me going. And I was like, this might not be as far-fetched as I thought. So let's take a look at his possible Nobel-winning idea. So this article on Financial Samurai was published about a week ago, and he's talking about how to appropriately assess what your risk appetite is, essentially. One thing he points out that goes into the formula, which he calls the SEER, and we'll get into that in a second, but based on history, the average drawdown in the S&P 500 is about 35%. Okay, that's valuable information and lasts about 12 to 15 months. He also points out the average historical returns for the S&P 500 since 1926 is about 10% with dividends reinvested. Just meaning as soon as you get a dividend, you put it back in. So that's interesting. So the average drawdown is about 35%. So he uses that as kind of the foundation of this SEER formula, and we'll get into that in a second. Now, it only discusses equity. It does not discuss real estate or cash, which is one of, I guess, the critiques I would have of it. And I would be curious on Sam's thoughts, and I'm curious about your thoughts too. So he says, in here he's talking about real estate. The median sales price of houses sold in America declined by about 19%. Average returns for real estate is between 1% and 2% above the average inflation rate. Okay, and here's a chart he's got of median sales price of houses for the United States. And I guess I'll let you decide. So this was the 2008 financial crisis here. And I mean, look at how, it's almost feels like it's just so steep here. So, in nominal terms, it looks like it could be a much greater correction than in 2008. Maybe not on a percentage wise, but nominally. So the easiest way to know you have the right asset allocation. So this is talking about more on the emotional side. And he's talking about how if you're losing patience with people you love and they've done nothing wrong, it could be, just you're losing money in the stock market. And that could be a sign that you have a little bit too much exposure for your own good. So he's talking about emotional exposure. And the thing I like about Sam a lot is really he's very pragmatic, and he puts a lot of emphasis on time, because time's your only non-renewable resource, whereas you can always go get more money, but you can't always get more time. And I think he does a great job balancing those ideas. And he talks frequently about his 2 kids and how he wants to spend time with them instead of just working more. Here he's got a chart that is a new life net worth allocation by age. This is kind of interesting that he kind of starts out more real estate and then grades off, which I am very heavy into real estate right now, which this SEER, the Samurai Equity Exposure Rule, doesn't take into account your real estate holdings or your cash holdings. It is just looking at equities. So, he's looking to quantify the risk tolerance, or your risk tolerance. So here's the formula, the SEER formula, and it is taking your equity exposure and multiplying by 35%. And that 35% came from the prior discussion that has been the average drawdown in the S&P 500 over your monthly gross income. Now I don't think he dives too much into why he's using gross income, because basically the idea is he's looking to check how much time you would have to work in months to make up a drawdown in your equities. So if you had $1 million in equities, 35% is 350,000. And if you're making $10,000 a month gross, I mean, that's 35 months basically, and that would be your risk tolerance multiple, 35. And he's saying that that's actually a fairly high multiple. So let's take a look at see what he says. Once you are willing to spend 24 months of your life making up for your losses, your risk tolerance is high. It says you are a conservative investor if you are unwilling to spend more than 6 months of your life making up for potential losses. Now, if you just looked at my equity exposure right now, and I'll include my wife too, because she actually has more stocks. So I was actually much higher in real estate, almost 80%. But when you factor her in, after we've gotten married, our exposure is about 65%. And according to this formula, we would be, I think, below 10. And that would get us into this moderate to conservative level. And I would say most of our friends would consider us kind of risky because we're so into real estate. So it's just different strokes for different folks, I guess. I mean, that's a hard thing to do, to quantify your emotions, or how do you have enough exposure or too much exposure. So here he's talking about his Nobel Prize in economics, and a lot of the theoretical models are very just based off of assumptions that are not really realistic. I mean, a lot of Econ 101, one of the base assumptions is that, people are rational. And I don't know what world you're living in, but a lot of the decisions that I see around me, sometimes they don't look too rational. But so it's just hard to see one person's rational decision to another's. So this is a very interesting read. I'll post it in the comments. I looked into Sam a little more just because, he doesn't mention cash in this. So for example, if you had $1 million and making 10 grand a month, so your risk number, according to this, where is it? Would be on the extreme side, according to this. But let's say you had, maybe that's only like a fraction of your net worth. Maybe you had $11 million sitting on the sideline. So you have $1 million in, and you have a $350,000 equity loss potential based on that 35% drawdown. But if you had, $11 million in cash, I mean, would you really say that person is or has like an extreme risk level? I don't know. I think it should depend on how much cash you have. And I guess I'm curious what your thoughts are on real estate exposure. Do you think real estate is similar to stocks? How would you rate these risk levels to amount of control? I mean, I would say, I would agree with these by and large. So that's kind of interesting. Now, I did get curious, and I poked around a little bit, and on Sam's Financial Samurai About page, he does have estimated passive income streams for 2022, which, I mean, kudos for him. I mean, he's like crushing it. $360,000 a year in passive income. So like 30 grand a month. I mean, that's just like bonkers to me. And like this ebook bringing in $38,000 a year. I have a couple books I'm lucky to get $50 a month. So that's kind of interesting. I did look online savings. So if you back this out, I looked at, let's say he's getting 2% on his cash right now, just to be conservative. So if he's bringing in, so we'll say 27, so 2760. He's got 2%. So I'm guessing he's got over 100 grand in cash, probably more like 140, 150, something in that range. So that kind of shows you at least how he is set up. And he's interestingly pretty concentrated in the San Francisco real estate market. He does have one Lake Tahoe property. And actually this real estate, I think he says, is more passive. So this is like just putting money in and sitting back. It's not as active as some of these rentals are, but curious what your thoughts are on being geographically diversified as well across asset classes. So just for me, I heard Mr. Wonderful say recently that he likes to not have more than 20% in any one sector and not more than 5% on any one stock or activity. So that 5% could be like, Bitcoin, like specifically, and then like 20% would be like cryptos, or 20% real estate, 5% one property. So I kind of like that framework, and I think I'm going to try to shift towards that. So I think we're a little over concentrated on real estate right now. And so that's what I'm looking to save a lot of cash right now and fund these whole life policies that I'll be able to borrow against later, and look for shares of stocks on sale. So that's kind of where we're at. He's got some great stuff on here, and I really appreciate his thoroughness and just his pragmatism on going through some of these decision makings, because thinking about your risk appetite and asset allocation is not an easy endeavor. And he also states that you oftentimes need 10 to 20 years to kind of think about your asset allocation and get it right, because you need to live through some of the cycles. And that's kind of interesting to think about too. So, my real estate properties are only about 5 and 4 years old, some of them, and the most recent ones are like a year old. And I'm just now starting to see some bad tenants and what that can cause on one of the properties. So very interesting, and I like a lot of his advice. Very, very sharp guy. And so I think it's not a fix all, but I like that he's trying to put some of the emotional side into numbers, and hopefully this can help you out and figure out where you are on your risk tolerance and how you should reposition your portfolio if it's not really aligned with your demeanor. So with that, I will sign off and see you next time. Bye.